Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me again. And we're going to dive right in today talking about the first essential element of playwriting, which is character. Now, unlike other kinds of storytelling, a character really drives the action of a play. What your character does, what your character wants, what your character says. These are all really integral questions to making a play. So the more exciting and complicated your character is, the more exciting and complicated your play is going to be.
Occasionally, we're going to stop the video to do some writing prompts, so make sure you have some materials that you can work with handy.
I like to think of three separate wells or mines, places where we can draw inspiration from when we're developing characters. The first of these wells is observation. The second, imagination. And the third is ourselves. So let's start with observation. A playwright has a really interesting vantage point that is a little bit unique to the rest of the world. You can think of yourself like a detective with a magnifying glass, or a scientist with a microscope, or even a journalist with a tape recorder. But once you start observing the world around you, you'll find that there's a lot of material just right now, even in your homes, in this moment of isolation and quarantine, where you have a really interesting petri dish, a really interesting cast of characters, or even animals or plants or objects, which have a lot of personality and characteristics to begin with. So a little bit of observation plus imagination yields a really exciting cast of characters. So challenge yourself to sort of put a frame around the people that you're living with right now and think of them as characters in a play. And that leads us really naturally to talking about the second well, which is your imagination. There are no limits to what you can put on stage aside from what you can imagine. The only limits to your playwriting are the limits of your own imagination. Your characters can be anything. They can be dinosaurs or astronauts or historical figures or animals or even plants. Really, truly, if you can imagine it, you can put it on stage. I would argue that the self is one of our greatest resources when we're creating character and story. I mean, a person changes a lot in their lifetime. A person can change a lot even over the course of 24 hours. And our experiences, our personality, our characteristics, the ways in which we change, what's important to us, how we react and reflect the world around us is really an endless wellspring. So I'm going to do a couple of exercises just to help you kind of get in touch with who you are as a person and how you might use that to create character, particularly when you combine it with observation and imagination. So we're developing character based on the three wells of observation, imagination, and ourself. And we're going to start answering some basic questions about who these characters are. And the first place to start is with their external, their outside characteristics. So what can we observe about this person in the way that they present themselves to the world? What do they look like? How are they dressed? Do they have any distinguishing physical characteristics? Do they take up a lot of space? Are they proud and powerful? Or do they shrink from public sight and try to take up as little space as possible? These are all things that you can observe on the outside. Next, there's internal characteristics. What is this person like on the inside? Who are they? What's their personality like? What are their character traits? What are they most proud of? Where are they most safe? What does their bedroom look like? What does their safe space look like? What is the one object that they would save from a burning building? What are the things that are important to them? What would they be like if they came over to your house? What would it be like to host them for dinner? Would they be funny? Would they be shocking? What are the ways that you would describe them to another person? And next, there's motivating characteristics. So these are the things that are really fundamental to who your character is. What are their drives, and what are the things they're scared of? What are the things that are pushing them forward in the world, and what are the things that are holding them back? So the two questions that I like to ask about motivation is, what is the character's biggest wish? What do they want most in the world? And in contrast to that, what is your character's biggest fear? What is the thing that they're most afraid of?
Power is my number one motivator. Money and control. I achieve this through politics and business. My biggest wish is to be the most stylish woman in the room at any time. My biggest wish is that all God's creatures will get along in peace and harmony. My biggest wish is to be a famous rock star.
My biggest wish is that magic is real.
My biggest fear is not being able to take care of myself. But I don't think that will ever happen. My biggest fear is humiliation. My biggest fear would be a personal crisis of faith. My biggest fear is that I'm totally gonna self-destruct.
My biggest fear is that I would be called upon to be brave and not be able to be brave, or that Harry Potter world would never be opened again, or that my cat would eat my face.
We're building up to writing a play, but on our way there, we're going to do some exercises, the way playwrights do, to give us some material to use for our final projects.
This work is process-oriented. This is not product. You will not be graded on this. You will not be handing this in. If this turns out to be really good material for the play that you're going to use, then fantastic. That's ultimately what we're building up to. But in order to build up to that, we need to remove the inner critic from the work that we're doing right now. So this is just free writing. This is just brainstorming. This is just fast and dirty, quick and loose. Just get it on the page, set a timer. You don't need to be precious about this, and this doesn't need to be perfect. If it's perfect, you're weird. That's really all I have to say about that. For the exercise today, I've attached a character survey to the video that's going to ask you these internal characteristic questions, external characteristic questions, and motivating characteristic questions. And I'd like you to fill it out 3 times. So for the first, I want you to use a character that you can observe. So take some time and observe somebody in your house. Somebody in physical space with you that you can have known over a period of time and that you have observed their external and internal characteristics, and try to answer the motivating characteristics as well. You might even want to interview that person in order to get some of those questions. Next, I'd like you to use a character from your imagination. So some of you may already have a character in mind about whom you'd like to write a play, and then I would say definitely use that person. And I would encourage you, if you have a cast of characters in your imagination already, that you use the protagonist or the main character from that group of people. If you haven't yet started thinking about what you'd like to write your play about, then I'm going to ask that you go back to the exercise from the first introduction video and use the character whom you wrote the story about that happened 30 or more years ago. Now that may be a story that you interviewed somebody that you know. It may even be the person that you're going to use for the observation exercise. But because the story took place at least 30 or more years ago, there's no way that you could have observed that person. So you're going to have to use your imagination to fill in like what your mom or dad or grandparent was like when they were, 14 or however old they are in the story that you detected and investigated. The third survey I'd like you to fill out is about yourself. So answer these same character questions, but ask them of yourself. Now I know I'm asking kind of a lot right now, and I want you to know that nobody needs to see this work. You do not need to turn it into me or your teacher. This is just for you. It's just for getting your mind and your imagination going. So one of the questions is going to be, what's your biggest secret? Don't feel that you need to write it down. You can think about it a little bit. You can reflect. You can write it down. You can write a whole play about it. That would be fantastic. But don't feel that anybody is going to see this work. All right, so let's move forward with the writing that we've done on observation, imagination, and the self. I hope that was productive for you. And again, not perfect, just putting ideas together, just process-oriented, not product-oriented. So now let's move that character into a circumstance. We're going to write a monologue for that character. So this is what I want you to imagine for writing prompt number 2. So the character that you have imagined. Now, not the character you have observed and not yourself, but the imagined character from the second survey is, for some reason, standing right outside your door. Wherever you are right now, 2020, in Vermont or Wisconsin or New York or California or Japan, they are standing outside your door and they are pounding on the door, and you open the door and they are in great distress. And because you are not a jerk, you say to them, "Oh, what's happening? How can I help?" And the character responds with, "That's your monologue, and go." Give yourself 5 minutes and just crank it out. Now, if you need help with coming up with a first line, you might want to try something like, "Oh, I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't answered the door," or "Help," or any number of things. I leave it to your imagination. So give yourself 5 minutes and just go. Write that monologue. All right, how was that? Welcome back. We're going to move right away onto the second writing prompt. And this time, I want you to write the character's response to the monologue. So we had you being the person who was answering the door. You can continue to use yourself, or you can use an avatar of yourself, or you can use another character that you've banked in your imagination. But I want you to use this character's speech to answer the world's greatest dramatic question, "And then what?" So far, we've had 3 and then what's. Character knocks on the door. Bang, 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 bang. And then what? You open the door and see the character in great distress. And then what? They answer your question about what it is they need or what they're looking for or why they're in distress. And then what? You respond. Now, you're going to respond to them by either having the solution, by gathering more information, by testing them, by further complicating their problem. But what I'd like to challenge you to do is to withhold the solution from the character in distress for as long as possible. Be cruel to be kind. You want to keep and dangle that for a little bit as long as you can, because that's going to create suspension and higher stakes in your play. So see, we're already writing a play. A play is just one line at a time. So you got this. Give yourself 5 minutes and write that response. What I'd like you to do for next time, if you want to go a little further, this is the extra credit session, is to draw a really complete visual image of your protagonist. Now, this can look like a couple different things, and use your imagination in terms of how you want to do this. This can be a drawing. This can be a series of pictures that you've collected off the internet. This can be the actor who might play this character in the movie, and maybe a description of why this actor is perfect. What's your pitch when your agent calls their agent? It could be like a vision board, a mood board. It could be a series of images that you've collected on something like Pinterest. You can think about collage or colors, but put together something that sparks your imagination and that gives you a visual place where you can look back and you can say, "Ah, yes, Max. This is what Max looks like. This is what Max reminds me of. Max, age 16, is this series of images. This is what helps to get my imagination fired up when I need to think more about Max." So good luck with that. And if you'd like to, you can send it to me via my email, which will pop up in the next screen. Thanks so much for spending time with me, and I'll see you next time.